Hello, everybody. So I had someone reach out to me last week, towards the end of last week, and asked me what did I think about the United States talking about banning travel from South Africa and 7 other African countries due to the COVID. Well, because this is YouTube, I gotta watch what I say, but due to the variant that's showing up in South Africa, and also the variant that is showing up in, I think it's South Africa and seven other sub-Saharan countries. And here's my take on it. My first thing was, I talked to the last group of travelers that we had because we actually just came back from South Africa about a month ago. And this is one of the reasons why I was so happy that the group trusted me and they looked to me and my leadership and my expertise in advising. And at that time, I expressed to the group that it's time for us to travel. We have to make moves. If we're talking about South Africa, a place where the politics gets really tricky from time to time, we have to follow through with this trip, because the trip actually was scheduled for June of 2020, but obviously we all know what happened then. So as a result of it being scheduled for June of 2020, we had to push it back, and we pushed the trip back several times. And it was all, of course, due to what the travelers felt the most comfortable doing. And so probably around, I'll say June, May or June of this year, I had a meeting with them, and we talked about, okay, let's plan to do South Africa. This is the definitive date that we were going to go, which was a date that was landing us in traveling in October. And I expressed to them, like, we need to do this. Let's not delay. Let's just make it happen. And so they agreed to it. It was one of those things where I think they were hesitant. They weren't 100% sure. And I have to check in with the members of the group just to see how they're feeling now. But for me, it's more of, I'm glad they listened to me, and I'm glad they took the time to move at that point, because right now, it's a very political environment when we're talking about this variant. And the reality is from us being in South Africa for the time that we were, it's a very clean country. People sanitize up and down. Like, you cannot go into a business establishment, any store, without having them sanitize your hands. You cannot you cannot go some of these places without somebody pointing a temperature gun at you and checking your temperature. It's really very, very thorough in South Africa, more thorough than most other places. Now, the 7 other countries that they talked about restricting travel to and from for U.S. citizens and for people coming from those countries, I would say those countries actually have a fair amount of representation in the country of South Africa. So the countries like Zimbabwe, countries like Malawi, I believe Malawi is on the list, Botswana is on the list. Like, all of those like little sub-Saharan countries have lots of their citizens that actually call South Africa home. And so my take on it is, again, with all of the news, you look at the information that's being disseminated, but you also have to factor in the political angle that is also very much influencing the news and the story and how they're reporting it to us. What I often encourage people to remember is, because we actually have a trip to the African continent, a couple of trips to the African continent that are coming up, that people still have expressed interest in and can sign up. I always tell people, don't let the news from one African country, or in this case 8 African countries, confuse you and make you miss out on visiting the African continent, and whether it be in 2022 or 2023 or years beyond. Like, you don't want to let today's news influence and impact you in a way that prevents you from experiencing the continent and all of its beauty. Just know that these are news cycles. Some of it, not some, it's all very cyclical, and the stories are very temporary stories oftentimes. But having been in the country about a month or so ago, like, I can tell you they're very safe. I can tell you they're taking every measure to protect people and their health. And I can also tell you there's a big let me not say that word on YouTube. There's a big campaign going to get all of their people inoculated. I'll say that word, inoculated. And a lot of the citizens of the country actually feel like the country is trying to force these inoculations on them. And so it's not really playing too well in the country itself. But again, with that being said, when you think of Africa, although oftentimes I will refer to Africa as the African continent as if it is one, I mostly do that because I understand that most people are not super familiar with the African continent. And so it's just easy for me to like describe things or describe trips or describe experiences that we have by simply referring to it as the African continent. But be mindful, there are 54 countries on the African continent. They're all distinctly different. They do not operate or function the same way. They all have different government structures, different leadership, different cultures, different customs, different languages. I mean, like, they're so different. And so I would just caution you, when you hear news about a country or several countries that are on the African continent, do not assume that is a representation of every single country, because it is absolutely not the case. So those are my thoughts on the variant. I hope you guys stay tuned. My computer is finally back up and running after it had crashed, and so my goal is to definitely be more consistent. All right, you guys, until next time.